Welcome everyone to this webinar organized by ALDA, the European Association for Local Democracy. My name is Eva and I will moderate the debate today. So I will just briefly introduce the speakers that have joined us today. So today with us we have Paolo Cellot, who is the founder and general secretary of EAVI, the European Association for Viewers' Interests, who will tell us what can be considered acceptable in social media. Eileen Yara Janet, project coordinator at Media Diversity Institute, will present the Get the Trolls Out project. And Dietima Bertel, research and project coordinator at CINIO, will present the EUNOMIA project. Both projects focusing on fake news and information and digital literacy. Within the agenda, you can also find the link to the organizations and to the different projects if you want to have a look. And I would now give the floor to Paolo.
Yeah.
For his presentation. Thank you, Paolo. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I will try to make this presentation as clear as possible, and therefore I don't like a PowerPoint presentation. I mentioned it before, but this we prepare it, so I will go through some of the slides quite quickly. And then I will stop more on certain things that I judge may be more interesting for our participants. Very briefly is something about EAVI, you know, or you may know that is a not-for-profit organization. We are based in Brussels. Our main activity is to promote media literacy for citizenship, as we say, so to participate in public life in an informed way. And we have a number of activities that range from research, policy projects, social media campaigns, online conversations, many infographics, cartoons, etc., etc. As you mentioned, if you want more information about EAVI, so it's very easy to find them online. Now, these are a project, some of us, an example of projects that we are participating in. Obviously, all of them they relate to this is about training of media literacy. Again, they're easy to be found online. Is some infographic on this is on the topic of disinformation, and again, there are a number of educational tools and resources that you can find on our website. So what I would like instead to focus on for this conversation, I will just throw some points of reflection to the debate, if there is a debate or question and answer. If there is not, is possibly and hopefully something that you can reflect upon on your own when or with your friends, is just to have more resources to reflect on the subject, which is the title of the presentation is indeed is what is allowed, what is reasonable for social media, which are private companies to do, taking as an example what has happened recently a couple of weeks ago only, when the president of the United States is incite people to assault somehow is at the parliament of the states themselves, no, the Congress. Is just one more point of reflection is to show the relationship between disinformation and media literacy. I'm not going through all of this, which is quite complicated, but is obviously is disinformation or fake news, as is sometimes call it, but disinformation is much proper term to be used, is a kind of content. So the capacity of evaluating content and the context within which is the content is distributed is one of the property that falls within let's call it the critical thinking and this cognitive capacity that we should possess in order to evaluate that content. So that's where is, I think, in your webinar title, you call it digital literacy. It's fake news and digital literacy. Is we would call it possibly more properly disinformation and media literacy, having digital literacy as a part of media literacy and disinformation as a part of a kind of content that we should reflect upon. Now, I have been good because I am already on slide 7 in 2 minutes, but I think this is where hopefully the certain things could be more useful to reflect upon. You know that I mean the facts that precede the decision of some social media to ban the President of the United States from using those were the fact that not now, but in fact since many months or many years, is he has used Twitter especially to state what somebody was calling alternative facts, or essentially lies, saying that I don't know, is global warming doesn't exist, is Barack Obama is from Africa, is I won the elections, and so forth. Is we should consider that is Donald Trump has had is 88 million followers. So is whatever he says obviously has a big impact on the debate that follows. He has follow is more specifically is that those statements inciting and encouraging and inviting people to assault the American Parliament, the Capitol, and the Congress, and this has indeed happened. And following, and it was not a school trip, as somebody is trying to sell it. There were, I mean, 5 people have died, and but not only that, is he was certainly not a peaceful protest or demonstration like the one that is just now outside my office and windows, where people from Armenia are putting forward their arguments to have their countries protected more. The is happening here because my offices are just in front of the Consilium and the European Commission, so that's where a lot of protest that takes place in Brussels. So the starting with Facebook and Twitter is permanently or temporarily is they have banned Trump. Is YouTube as follow is then Trump too, and when I say Trump, obviously it's not just him, but the many followers that and groups that follow his indications decide also, okay, I will create or I will use alternative social media like this Parler, and this was also Amazon removed it from his network and server also. So it's very powerful that there was a collective somehow mobilization from these private companies to make that decision. Now, was it the right decision? was it wrong? You mentioned, Eva, some of the issues that are at stake in your slide just before. Many argue that is a matter of freedom of speech. So everybody should be able to say whatever they want. Terms and the concepts of censorship do apply, to which extent, to which limits. Big debate it is maybe important to mention that is the area of democracy and freedom of speech has been exploited, say, and disinformation is exactly that, is a way in which somebody is pursuing and presenting false facts, is to deceive is the reader, the person that receive that information. Big debate is also to the fact, and I would like to point it out because it is important to mention that within freedom of speech and this universal the Declaration of the Universal Right, it does mention also the fact that people have the right to receive information. So somehow they should have the right to receive a correct information as well. He was discussing this with some people of the UNESCO and the Council of Europe. But we have to keep in mind that the declaration was made a few years ago, and it was obviously linked to the context that we had there. So is EU, we say, was it a threat to democracy? Is the Council of Europe is working on the integrity of elections? Are people capable of making informed decisions? Is it up to private companies, in fact, to defend some public interest or not? What would have happened if it would have happened in Europe? You know that is the first European companies within the internet companies is only at place 24 worldwide. All the big tech are either based in the States or in China, which is the leverage that Europe would have had on, say, Twitter, if this would have happened in a European country. And again, the decision was right because it seems there are some statistics that show that this disinformation has decreased since then. Is it true? No. Is the difference between public opinion and mass opinion? So an informed decision to take certain actions, the role of media literacy, and so forth is the role of bubble, echo chamber, and for the future is one element that maybe is worth, because it's less mentioned in the debate, to think about is the steal of data. I think that we shouldn't be surprised if in a little while we will find that some data from public or private institutions have been stolen and that they will be used against a political opponent for scandals or so. So this is also is a very sensitive topic. But I come to my main slide. Are you still there? Is it fine? Can I continue? I don't hear any. It's difficult.
There is a question, if you wish. I can read it.
Yeah, please.
From Minika Pezic. She's asking, what is EAVI's stand on banning political influencers such as Trump from social media platforms?
Well, I will after this introduction and this setting the scene I will come to very precise opinion. EAVI as there to. I think it's not time anymore to hide with behind the diplomacy of saying, yeah, well, it's somehow everything is acceptable, everything is defendable somehow, but is very much is at the time democracy is the fight for democracy. And you will see, I will mention 3 opinions that at EAVI we have mature about those facts. I will come to that in a second. The one element is to judge all of this is to keep in mind that people's opinion are the perception of what is right and what is wrong is changing is over time. And Overton, the Overton window is applying to social media is a good example of that. Is certain things that we consider or we could consider is from that are radical or unthinkable, like the QAnon conspiracy theory or many other ideas that would have thought absolutely impossible to believe, is they become, following a precise strategy by design, less and less radical and more acceptable is by the people. So the window, which is somehow what people consider that is normal and expect, and outside is radical, moves either to from the top or now is a freedom of speech we have mentioned, but the values of ethics is also important, up and down, depending on whether we would think that we want more rules, more policy, or in fact, and somehow more justice, or instead we want a system, a society that is a way in which people give themselves rules, each other, is for the common good. Is we want more freedom. Is freedom, all this ideology thinking that are related to even to free market, but it's not a free market anymore. When we talk about social media, in fact, it's a big oligopoly or monopoly. It is to say that this window is also moving from left to right, depending on the for instance, is it acceptable that people go to the Congress, American Congress? Yeah, well, some are saying in the end that they were just protesting. A while ago, in the States, was illegal to sell alcohol. Now we would think unthinkable. If you force people to accept radical ideas, then you sort of legitimate somehow dishonest people. As Trump has just given the grace to Steve Bannon, people that are for sure would have end up in prison because otherwise. Not these all right-wing groups. Or these extravagant concepts or theories they risk to become more and more acceptable. If certain things become acceptable or reasonable or popular even, then we should be cautious, because what has happened in the States is that the representative of an institution, is the president of the United States, was leading a group that was very radical, and therefore they felt legitimate to do what he was saying. In the end, well, I did what my president asked to do, and this is a risk, a threat for democracy, indeed. And all the echo chamber and bubbles is obviously do fall within these slides, but we didn't want to make it too complicated. So let me see if I manage to go to the next one. Yeah, so in this context, I don't want to make the story too long. Is one of the things that AVI certainly welcomes is more regulation. So more rules, and we welcome a number of initiatives that the European Commission is taking and has taken recently in the last months, is that they all foresee is to certain level, everything can be optimized, obviously, and make it better, but is a start that Europe is showing, while the rest of the world is certainly not China or Russia, but not the States these days intends to act upon. The second thing is that we certainly need more media literacy. So we need to have people that are more capable of making sense of what is happening in front of them. Is the content, as we said before, but also what social media can or cannot do, and what they should do. In fact, is as AVI, we have a number of initiatives that we will roll on. Is our conversations online and campaigns, projects, policy. Obviously, we are in Brussels, and research as usual. The main, I'm a bit rushing, but if we would want at one point to have more, to go deeper in certain of the things that I've mentioned, I would be more than pleased. Is the main point is somehow what ALDA and others are doing, that is to feed the debate. So to discuss those issues is always a good contribution to help people eventually to get information and to be able to shape their mind and opinion about what is in their interest, in the public interest, and obviously balancing is the needs of society with the individual interest, and within this where do fall the private is commercial interest and the political ones. So it's going to be, to conclude, a very deep and long debate. We'll have the same issues coming over and over in the next years, for sure, very similar each other, and we should be able to have people that are better and better equipped to deal with those issues. So thank you very much for the time being. I will become available behind this screen. So the floor is back to you, Eva. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for your insights on also on current events. We can move forward. I can give the floor to Diotima.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for this the invite to this interesting webinar, and thanks, Paolo, for your interesting presentation on current events. I will try to provide some more hands-on guidelines on how to deal with misinformation, disinformation, and what we call fake news as part of what we've researched in the EUNOMIA project. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Just to give you some context, I will not go into detail and give you a lot of information about the project, but as some sort of context information, it is an innovation project, an innovation action by the European Commission. And the project's goal is to develop a digital companion, we call it, as a set of tools that allows users on social media to decide what kind of information they identify as trustworthy and what kind of information they think is not trustworthy, that raises their concerns, information that they basically find difficult and might be misinformation. And all of these technical tools that are in this one technical solution are built around a concept that we call information hygiene. And in this concept, we've come to a set of recommendations that I want to present today. And one more thing is that the EUNOMIA technical solution has 3 different kinds of users, intended users. That is the general citizen on the one hand, so every social media user basically, but it's also intended to be used by traditional media journalists on the one hand and social journalists on the other hand. So if you can go to the next slide. This is just a very brief overview of the last prototype we had. It looks a bit different now, but basically the first functionality we've introduced is the possibility to vote on trustworthiness of a post on social media or the source that's been posted on social media, and to give a set of indicators. And I won't bore you with the technical details of our peer-to-peer network and the blockchain infrastructure and the whole concept of human as a trust sensor. All of these things, if you're interested, first of all, you can always contact me, and you can also visit our website and get in touch. But yeah, this is just the context information, and now to the interesting part. What can we do to practice information hygiene? If you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so the context, I think we haven't defined the word as such, but we're currently living in an infademic, which is what the WHO has called this massive spread of information and misinformation during the past year especially. And this means there's such a massive amount of information that users or any citizen is unable to differentiate what is trustworthy, what isn't. It's really difficult to orient yourself within this amount of information. So the decision what information to trust, what communicated to trust, is becoming increasingly complex. And also, it needs to be taken into account that misinformation is a multi-layered social challenge, a societal challenge. And the current global pandemic showed how difficult it can become, quite drastically. It showed how difficult it become to respond to a pandemic when there is so much confusion going on, when there is a difficulty to communicate correct information, because there is also a lot of misinformation going on. Misinformation that might even endanger people's lives if the recommendation is, for example, to inject bleach. And it's also been accompanied by a lot of distrust. All of these are more or less to set the scene of what we're living in. Misinformation is a problem bigger than that, but an infodemic is a massive problem that we're living through at the moment. If you could go to the next slide, please. So within this context, we defined a concept of what we call information hygiene, which we did in comparison to the hygiene guidelines that were so widely communicated at the beginning of the pandemic: washing your hands for 30 seconds, keeping keeping a distance of 1 meter or 2 meter, these different guidelines that were widely known and widely communicated, and also very simple. And that's the key. They need to be simple. They need to be part of one's everyday routine, and for that they need to be simple. And when we looked and researched the different guidelines, how can we deal with information, with misinformation, with disinformation, we found that they are oftentimes vague, time-consuming, or difficult or complex to adopt as part of one's everyday routine, because they require time, they require effort, and that's something that user on social media especially often does not have. So, inspired by these hygiene recommendations, we try to find what we call routines that reduce the risk of infection with misinformation. Because, for example, checking a source, cross-checking information with another piece of information, that takes time. We want to reduce this time and allow users to do something quickly. That doesn't mean that these guidelines aren't valuable and aren't important. They are, definitely. But this is one step, a really small step, but something that can be quite powerful and quite effective if introduced into one's everyday routine. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I have just a sort of a little bit of background information showing the process of how we did that research. So we started with quite a lot of guidelines on how to check information, all these different guidelines that we found that have all different measures. Next slide, please. And reduced them. We compared them, reduced them, we classified them according to the 4 aspects you see here, according to source, content, language, and recommendation. And then we carried out a PICO analysis, which is an analysis taken from the development of medical hygiene guidelines. Now we can go to the next slide, please. This is one example. I won't go into detail here, so please go to the next slide. We can follow up with this if you have questions. We also carried out a systematic literature review to find scientific evidence for the recommendations that we had. Next slide, please. Assess them, our guidelines against the scientific evidence. Please go to the next slide. That's fine. Found them on different journals, support strength, and support types. So we really calculated and tried to identify how valuable we think, or how much evidence we could find for these recommendations. And then if you go to the last slide, the next slide. And this is how we ended up with 9 specific recommendations. And now to the main part, these recommendations. Next slide, please. Yes, so first recommendations. And this is something, all of them are something that can be done easily and simply and as part of your everyday routine. So first recommendation is to be cautious of information forwarded through your network. We know from research that we're less careful, we let down our guards when we provided information from friends, especially if they're trusted friends, especially if they're friends or people where who we assign a certain expertise. So if we think that they are experts in something and we trust them, we also automatically trust the information they give us more. And while this is not necessarily a bad thing, it still means that we shouldn't completely let our guard down. We still should treat some information at least with consciousness, or with a grain of salt, basically. And just as this is also something our technical tools will support. It will be able to see where information came from, how it has been changed over time, what was the original source of this piece of information. Next slide. We also want to point out that it's always good to be wary of very popular posts. Research has shown time and again that misinformation travels significantly faster, deeper, and more broadly than factual statements. That doesn't mean that a popular post necessarily is wrong, is false. It just is one of the indicators that you could look at when trying to identify whether information is misinformation or it isn't. Emotion is a very important part of misinformation and disinformation. If a post is designed to make you feel emotional, the intent usually isn't to be factual, to provide information. It is intended to become viral because emotion has this effect. If people react to it, they might share it. This means that this information will spread faster. It will also mean that we might remember it longer because it activates our memory. Research has also shown that a lot of misinformation and disinformation uses sensational and inflammatory language that is intended to make us feel emotional. So if a post is, or a piece of information as such is very emotional, it might be one of the indicators to choose it's misinformation. Next slide, please. And in this line, it's important to be cautious of one's own emotions, especially anger. Anger makes us susceptible to biases, and anxiety promotes initial beliefs. So in general, a heightened emotionality can be a predictive and increased belief in misinformation. So again, emotion is just one of the indicators and one of the things that we should be cautious with, especially in a social media context. Another important guideline, and because it is important, as you can see that, for example, Twitter has already implemented this as one of their features, it is important to refrain sharing information just based on a headline without reading content. And Twitter has implemented a feature where it asks you, are you sure you want to share this if you haven't clicked on a link that's contained within a tweet? And this is exactly what we're referring to here. Is we recommend to stop sharing any kind of information that it's only repeated in the headline, even if the headline is maybe factually interesting, is correct. And this is especially important because only reading a false statement once makes it more likely that we later think it's correct. This is called the illusory truth effect. And there's lots and lots and lots of research on this effect and how it influences what we think is true and is false. And even if we know that the statement is false, having read it before and being familiar with it still makes or still has this effect to a certain degree, even if we disagree with the statement. So that shows how effective this illusory truth effect is and how dangerous it can be, and how important it is in that sense to refrain sharing based on a headline, and also to adjust our strategies to deal with misinformation. So if you could go to the next slide, please. It's also important, and research has shown that it's very already a little nudge, a little hint can be very, very powerful to stop misinformation. Just stopping and thinking for a second already helps to flatten the curve of the infademic, so to say. Very often there is no malintention. People don't share misinformation because they want to. They do so by accident. And if they see a flag, if they see a hint, a nudge in some way, that focuses their attention to, well, is this actually true? Should I be sharing this? To think a bit more critically about it is already a very effective way to stop misinformation. Like with very high emotions, we also recommend to be wary of resharing information that is very new, especially in the case of breaking news. It's better to wait for trusted sources. Misinformation travels faster than factual information because it's novel, because it's human to be attracted by novelty. It's something to do with our attention, and it's something that we have observed time and again. So it's important to be very careful. And one good example, or not a bad example, but something that happens very often, for example, in terrorist attacks, there's lots and lots and lots of misinformation shared because it's new, it's something that's happening at the moment, but it's also something that's endangering, for example, police work at that moment, and endangering possibly people's lives. And I think this is the final recommendation. When commenting or reposting a piece of information that is not true, and this is connected to what I said earlier, it is important to add an explanation as to why it's not true, what actually is the fact. Don't just repeat a piece of misinformation, because then you will create this illusory truth effect. You will repeat it, you may make it familiar, and it will not stick. It will stick rather than being seen as a piece of misinformation. It will be amplified by this act. Oh no, sorry, there's one more. And finally, if you could use, if it's provided on social media, it's always recommended to use a dedicated tool or button to flag misinformation. And this is also something that we, with the EUNOMIA tools, with the EUNOMIA solution, want to do. We want to force users to think critically about content. We want to think whether they trust it or not. And trustworthiness doesn't necessarily mean it's true, it's factual. It's a subjective concept, but thinking about the concept, whether it's trustworthy or not alone, forces you to stop and think. And this is a most important recommendation. In summary, if there's something that seems fishy, if there's something that makes you doubt whether it's true or not, just don't share it. This is the most effective measure of, well, stopping misinformation, or at least limit it down to a certain degree. So these were our 9 recommendations that should be were possible to be adapted into one's routine. We think they're quite helpful. We've tested them, and yeah, now we're working to provide the technological tools to yeah, apply them in social media and every day. And if you could go to the final slide, please. Yeah, so if you want to know more about the EUNOMIA project, we're happy to provide you with more information. We're also very soon testing a prototype, a second prototype, so we're more than happy to answer any questions about the technological solution. And obviously we'll continue our work on misinformation. And I think there's yeah, an interesting connection to what you've presented before, Paolo, because it's so important to connect this issue of misinformation to digital literacy and media literacy. And this is something where these recommendations might be can be a first step on the way to, yeah, better information hygiene. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Diotima, for these for sharing with us these guidelines in the use of social media. It was extremely interesting. There is someone is raising his hand. Maybe there is a question for you, Diotima. Let's see, Mr. Sebastian Lasse, you can try to open your microphone if you wish to make a comment or to ask a question. There is also a written question. Sandro Oke is asking if you can say more about how these connect to tools. What will the next prototype to support this?
Yeah. What we so the first prototype was mainly focused on this voting functionality, trust this, don't trust this. What we're working on now is what we call the information cascade, which is a way to show where a piece of information came from and on social media, not in the whole internet, but on social media. So who was the original poster, and then adding AI analysis of the sentiment. So how has it changed from the first post to the latest one? And the stance. So is it objective or subjective? Is it positive or negative? We don't say to the user, we don't make a decision for the user. We don't say this is false because it's negative and objective, but we want to show how a debate changes to make the user think or check in case they are wary about this information, in case they are suspicious or if they have any doubts. So it's easier. It's a way to make it easier to find out where information is coming from. So this is what we're working on at the moment, as well as the mobile application, which is soon to be launched.
So I will give now the floor to Eileen.
Great, thank you.
Here you go. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. So first, thank you to Paolo and Diotima for your presentations. My name is Aline. I work for the Media Diversity Institute, and one of the main projects I work on is Get the Trolls Out, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a bit. But what I want to briefly talk about today is how we can use innovative media formats to engage young people in the fight against hate speech and fake news and disinformation. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think there's so many amazing resources out there, as we've even seen in this webinar. There's so many interesting projects and information around fake news and disinformation. And I just want to provide some tools that we've found work for us in terms of engaging young people in that fight, because at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the aim that a lot of us have, is that we want to engage as many people as possible in that fight against fake news and misinformation. So a little bit about the Get the Trolls Out project. So our project and a campaign to combat discrimination and intolerance based on religious grounds in Europe. So our main focus is religious hate speech. However, within that context, we come across a lot of fake news and misinformation. Oftentimes those kind of go hand in hand. And we aim to kind of harness the power of social media to disseminate innovative media outputs and also to generate a dialogue in order to deliver different counter narratives on hate speech. And one of the main target audiences of our campaign is young people. So we've been running for quite a few years, and throughout those years, we've really tried a lot of different techniques on how we can engage young people on this topic. So in terms of what we actually do within the Get the Trolls Out project, there's a few core elements of what we do. The first one being media monitoring. So we have a total of 8 partners. Media Diversity Institute is the lead, and then we have 7 different partners around Europe. And each partner organization monitors both traditional and social media, looking for hate speech on those platforms. Every month, we take those results of the media monitoring exercises and we create different outputs. And we also have kind of more specific media monitoring exercises. We actually just completed a really big exercise on QAnon, looking at the QAnon kind of misinformation and fake news movement and kind of the mainly anti-Semitic elements of that. And that's a real core part of our project. And from that, we also submit complaints to different bodies, to editors. We talk to social media platforms. We make public and private complaints regarding the content that we find through our media monitoring. And lastly, we also produce a variety of articles which we use to debunk kind of anti-religious stereotypes that we find in the media, and also to give voice to personal testimonies. But of course, the big question with all of this is we produce all of this content and we want to engage young people with this content. We want people to be interested, to get involved, and to be engaged. So the question is, how do we do that? How can we engage those young people? So like I said earlier, we've been running for quite a few years, and I think over those years, we've kind of constantly reviewed and adapted our strategy. Not only because we're always looking to improve it, but also because I think the effectiveness of certain techniques really change over time. But there have been some key things that we've really learned in terms of engaging young people on this topic. And to explain a little bit about how we create outputs, like I said, we have all those articles that we write, and they're very in-depth and kind of detailed. And we want a middle step between people looking at our content and going to those articles, because not everyone has the time, or perhaps not everyone has the interest to read those really long articles. And so we want to create media outputs so that people can still engage with the content without having to take a significant amount of time out of their day to read a really in-depth report or article. So when it comes to those media outputs, one of the main things that we found is essential is to always keep it casual. We don't at any point want to come across as preachy. I think the way that we talk to an audience that we try to engage should be really conversational. And people should feel like they can come to us and talk to us on a very casual basis. And we don't want to be kind of too academic and formal because it can put some people off. The second thing that we always keep in mind is that we always try to keep it fresh. What I mean by that is to really kind of keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to pop culture, when it comes to maybe current movements that young people are really invested in, and to use those things for your campaign, for your project. An example of this within the Get the Trolls Out project was that a little while ago, we launched a resource that was about the different type of, we call them trolls, so people that you meet on the internet who might be quite negative, and how to interact with them. And we were trying to find different ways in which we could promote this content to engage young people in it and to get us a really positive conversation going around it. And we decided to launch that report together with the film, which was launching at a time called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. At the time, that was really popular. And so we decided to name our resource Fantastic Trolls and How to Fight Them. We kind of jumped on that trend of the movie premiere and really were able to engage a large group of people. Kind of in that line, I think it's extremely important to always create stimulating content, always have a call for action there. Don't just share information and leave it at that. Always stimulate your audience. And connected to that is, I think it's essential to use a multimodal approach when you're trying to engage not only young people, I think any group of people. People want to see different types of media content. You know, if you only focus on one type of media format and you use that time and time again, it might be effective at the start, but I think over time, people lose interest if they're seeing the same thing again and again. So always try new things to engage people constantly. And be persistent in that approach. Understand that not every type of new content that you're trying to create is going to be as effective. Some things aren't going to be as effective as others. That's fine, but stay persistent with it and keep going and always try new things. And be practical with it. It can be time consuming, I think, trying all these new media formats, trying innovative things. So stay practical, use kind of the free resources which are out there, learn from other people in this space, see what's working from them and go from there. And I think more than anything, the key lesson in all of this is that I think in order to engage young people, you need to talk to young people. That goes for any sort of target audience that you're wanting to engage. I think sometimes we can get caught up in kind of brainstorming within our teams, brainstorming about different ways that we can engage people without actually talking to those people. So take the time to ask young people or any group of people that you're trying to target. Ask them, you know, what do you already know about fake news? What do you want to learn about fake news? What kind of content do you want to see around fake news and hate speech? And learn from them and then use that in your own approach. I think that's, if anything, the key lesson for anyone that's trying to engage young people in this space. So I want to go through quickly some of the kind of innovative media formats that we've used within Get the Trolls Out in this space. So the first kind of main thing that we use is that we use a lot of videos. We find that videos can be really engaging for people. They can be fast. This one, for example, is only 1 minute long. And this was an example of what we call a journalism sins video, where we got a case from our media monitor in Germany, in this example, of an article that had a lot of anti-Muslim tropes and narratives in it. And we wanted to convey that content to our young people that were following us, but we wanted to do it in a way that didn't seem too overwhelming. So although we wrote quite an in-depth article about this case, which people could go read if they wanted, we wanted to create this video so that people could spend a minute of their day to get kind of the basic gist of what the issue was. And then if they were interested, great, they could look further, and if this is all that they wanted to see, then at least they still had some engagement from this and they still perhaps learned something new. So you find that these videos are extremely successful. And we use different media formats. This one is more of what we call an explainer video, where we kind of dive in on a specific topic. In this case, it was the Vlaams Belang Party in Belgium, and kind of the very right-wing political party. And we wanted to explain kind of some of the disinformation that they use in their campaigns, and also some of the xenophobic and Islamophobic tropes that they use. So this is, I believe, a 2-minute video that gives people a really good overview. So again, it's just an example of engaging people in different ways, in different formats, if they don't want to read a full report. And when it comes to video, I think some of the main things that we've learned is to always take a tailored approach. So this can be just for videos, but just in general for content, for any sort of project, if you're looking to engage people, one piece of content and one kind of media format is not going to work on all social media platforms. So if you're looking to focus on Instagram, for example, you're going to mainly want to focus obviously on image-based content, and you can still do some videos there, but you wouldn't necessarily engage with young people on Facebook, because the majority of young people don't use Facebook anymore. So based on who you're targeting, take a very tailored approach for that. And then when it comes to videos, always keep the videos concise. You know, if you put too much information in a video, people are going to lose interest quite quickly. And kind of in that same realm, stay quite basic with it as well. You don't want to overload people with a bunch of data in a video, because you're going to lose interest very quickly. Focus on kind of the main conclusions from that case or from that research, and then people can go through your report if they want more detailed information. And lastly, when it comes to videos, be bold. You know, those first few seconds of a video is what's really going to engage someone. So start with your most kind of important finding, use a really bold image, use a bold title, so that people kind of get hooked to keep watching. So besides videos, we've tried to use a range of other media formats and platforms. Something that's worked really well for us is using Instagram to convey different cases that we find. And this is an example of a recent carousel that we did on Instagram. So carousel just being a series of images that someone can kind of swipe through. You can see here that the first image is quite bold and might capture someone's attention. And then the actual information on the slides is pretty basic, it's to the point, but people get a good idea of this specific case. And we found this is quite effective on Instagram, because people can kind of get information in just 30-40 seconds of reading this. Something else that we've tried to use is memes, which I think memes can be a little bit tricky, because I think sometimes there's a very fine line between using kind of comedy and satire when it comes to discussing serious topics like fake news and hate speech. But I do think that they can be very successful as well, because it's a way to kind of poke fun at some things when that's suitable, and it's a totally different media form that you might see otherwise, and so that engages people. Again, people see something different, they get interested in that. So it's something that we're still trying out now and then within the Get the Trolls Out team. I think it can be quite difficult to create memes, but when we've done it in the past, we've seen a lot of engagement on that, so it's something that I always recommend to at least try out. We also use cartoons as a more kind of image-based format, again, mainly on Instagram. And finally, infographics can be great as well, especially if you're talking about, in this case, how to report hate speech on a certain platform. Infographics can be used for anything, of course, like how to spot hate, fake news you can do a great infographic on that as well. I know there's many out there. But again, it's just another way to engage people. So that was my examples that I wanted to run through, and that's kind of the end of my presentation. I basically just wanted to show some of the ways that we can engage young people in this fight against hate speech and fake news. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Thank you for sharing with us these different tools and formats to engage young people. Let's see if someone has some questions. Yes, there is a question for you, Eileen. What about TikTok? It's quite popular among youth.
Yeah, I think TikTok is a really good platform to start sharing content, especially if you want to target those young people. It's something that we've been starting to try out, both to create content on there, and also I think there's so many already great content creators on TikTok who talk about these topics. So collaborating with them in any way and using that platform, I think that's the way forward for anyone that's engaging young people in their projects and campaigns.
And then there is another question. How successful are MDI actions towards IT platforms?
Sure, so I can talk about kind of the Get the Trolls Out project specifically. So we do quite a bit of policy work, and with our media monitoring results, we also take them to social media platforms to kind of start discussions on that. So for example, big things like Holocaust denial on Facebook, which for ages was a big issue, which has now finally been banned from the platform. Also, at the start of the QAnon kind of big leap that we saw at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we did an initial monitoring exercise on that. We collected those results and took them to a few different social media platforms to show them kind of the issues there. And I mean, there's lots of organizations and projects that do that, and I think all of us doing it together pushes these social media companies to make changes. So it's an extremely important part of our work, and it's something that we spend quite a lot of time on. And I think we've had cases where it has been successful.
There is another question for all the speakers. What should be the primary focus of the intern governance debate?
Well, I can mention something. There is a group, in fact, at EU level that is debating about internet governance that is by definition transnational, and the debate and the recommendation is very deep and long. It's quite obvious that in the kind of media society that we live nowadays, everything is very global, and therefore there is no solution that is not transnational or global or internet. I mean inter governance. So this applies, for instance, to the debate that is about having a digital tax. Each country has, not each country, but a few countries, France and others, have tried to introduce the digital tax, but it's with great difficulties, and so it doesn't seem feasible at a national level just, and they should be at least on a EU level, and the platforms are pushing to have an even more global agreement, which could be, by the way, a strategy to prolong the debate and not to have anything be put in place for the time being, but is no doubt that we should think about globally.
Hi, Milica Pešić, Mrs. That's okay, MS. A great presentations, I've really enjoyed. I'm Eileen's colleague from Media Diversity Institute, so I really wanted to hear what you are doing and where are the solutions. as you probably know, Article 19, freedom of expression, London-based organization, has been pushing for quite a while for what they call Global Social Media Council. And Paolo just mentioned something when talking about internet governance. Do you think that since it's a global problem, global challenge, and internet has no borders, as Paolo said, that something like this social media council could be the space where different stakeholders can get together and have an equal kind of debate with the IT platforms to fight hate speech, derogatory language, or whatever bad is happening there, without censoring the things. Thank you.
Just before I get to that, I take the opportunity, I don't know whether I will have it later, in fact, to join the congratulations for the presentation and the projects that Eileen and Diotima have presented, because they have both the benefit, I think, to focus on some practical aspects. Is very often we have a lot of rhetoric, a lot of moralistic instruction of what to do, but as we have underlined, people simply don't do it for various reasons. They don't have the time, or they simply don't want to do it. So I think that is when you mention both the optimize, the fact that all of this recommendation would be translated to some sort of app or button or a technology that would make it easier for people to use, as well as for Eileen, when you focus on things where young people are, the instruments that they use I think is the only way to have a bit of impact. Otherwise, of course, we want everybody to be more intelligent and skillful, but this is not going to be the case, unfortunately, for a little while still, because it requires much longer term investment in culture, education, and so forth. To come to Milica, I think and in fact, I joined the congratulations not only for the project, but for the organizations that are working like MDI in our same domain, and everything helps. Is indeed any space that could be created, like the one that you have mentioned, to discuss about specific things on internet governance. It helps to the condition, I think, that it reach a certain legitimacy and authoritativeness, so to inform the debate. If it is something a link is to policy, it must be to be effective. It must be I mean, it is a battlefield. So if we want something to happen, we have to lobby and to be present, and to be ready to talk to policymakers and so forth. Otherwise, it is still useful, but it's more of a think tank, a brainstorming, which I mean, it is equally useful. But there should be no limit in multiplying these spaces. Is linked a bit with what I was saying before. We have to offer spaces and opportunity to debate those issues, because in the end, we need to come to what is common sense, and is not that our recommendation for various and different projects they are particularly innovative or nice, or that is something that is I mean, a discovery that no one thought about. Is very much common sense kind of education, is that for people to find the information, but this is not happening. And therefore, if it is a war, we have to be very aware of who is the enemy. That is why it's good to take a position, to have an opinion, to say social media and Twitter is, for instance, they did well to ban Trump, notwithstanding all the other considerations that are legitimate and so forth. Is obviously much more and different. It needs to be done in the future. And who are the allies? We are quite numerous and good. I mean, we can count, I would say many of the citizens of Europe and in Europe, I intend also geographically is UK still, is or globally. No? So it's really a pity that we are polluted and distorted in the debate by a few is a commercial or political interest. So I think joining forces, we should not see each other as it seems the case sometimes as competitor. We are all aiming towards the same aim. So let's see synergies. Is having more networks, joining, is getting the best practices that you have mentioned there. It's great. I mean, let's do it together. We need to win. This battle is not a matter of left or right, it's a matter of democracy or civilization, if you wish. So and there are many, not only young people, but adults and with energies and ideas. So come on, let's continue at least like that, and we are, I mean, for sure we will be successful, I think. I hope.
Thank you very much, Paolo. I guess there is time just for one last question. This one is for Eileen. There is a question from Antonio Silva. Do you consider TikTok the most powerful platform at the moment? Generation Z is taking in fight hate speech and changing young people's mind.
I mean, I think TikTok is definitely a very powerful platform at the moment. I think when we talk about most powerful, it kind of depends on for what usage. I think for reaching young people, it is definitely probably the most powerful one at the moment. So I think it is extremely important for any kind of project and organization in this sphere to turn their attention to TikTok and see what they can do with it. But with that, I don't think we should then kind of ignore other platforms like Twitter and Instagram. I think if anything, like I said in my presentation, to always be multimodal and use those different platforms for different reasons or for different types of media formats. But definitely, I think TikTok is where our kind of main focus should definitely be going forward. Also in the fight against fake news and hate speech, I know we've been seeing in our monitoring on TikTok, unfortunately also kind of a rise in certain types of hate speech there. So it's a great platform to reach young people, but I think it's also a platform where a lot of work is there to be done to educate people about kind of fake news and hate speech.
So thank you very much. Thank you all for your insight on the topic. I hope participants enjoyed as well. Thank you very much and see you on the next webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
Eva.
Thank you.